Hi, I'm Anthony Tierno, author of Multivolume. Today I thought I'd talk about what it takes to write a truly epic story. Now you may be a reader who's just curious about what sort of stuff that goes into doing that 5 or 6 volume story that you love so much, as compared to a normal one-off tale. Or you may be a writer wondering just exactly what sort of a job you that you have ahead of yourself. So first let me state what qualifications I have to actually talk about this sort of thing. My Multivolume series is a big fantasy sci-fi epic that's 13 full novels long. And in fact, since I am an unknown, the first novel is so big that it's actually currently released in 2 volumes. The total is 5.2 million words and some 250 characters. After I finished that, I followed up with another story that was only 5 books and 1.3 million words, which puts it a little bit more than the Mission Earth series, I believe. And then someone else asked if I would help them with this other series I had in mind, and I said yes, because it was a rather interesting and unique concept. And then the person asked if I thought I could get away with pushing it to 3 books. I just finished book 8. So I have a certain amount of experience on going for the gusto storytelling wise, because I really like the big epic tales and lots of characters. Anyhow, I have a few notes on exactly what it takes, what's involved on getting a truly epic story, and not just on the multi-volume things, although those are my favorites. I've actually written a couple short stories that have sort of an epic feel. So if you're curious about just what sort of stuff is involved, then here we go. First, before you start chapter 1 of that first book, plan out the plot line for all the books involved. And again, in the case of Multivolume, 13 books, I had the entire plot line figured out in my head before I started the first book. So you at least need a general feel for your point A, B, and C and what's happening in between, so that you don't get stuck for an ending, so that you can structure it properly. And also, in my case, I love putting in little clues and hints here and there in the story. I'll have a scene in one book that and I've had friends ask, what's the scene doing here? 5 books later, he finds out. So in order to have that sort of connectivity, you really have to plan everything out ahead of time. At least just in the general broad strokes. Second, it's all in the details. Details not only of the plot, but the characters, in the world. The more detailed you make a world, the more real it seems. And the more real it seems, the more people are going to believe that this could be a real place and this could really happen, and so they'll go and buy into it emotionally. Details in the characters make them seem more real, and when the characters are real, what they're doing seems more real. Which leads me to planning out the characters. Now, before a given book, I outline more specifically, the details of what's going on in that book. And then I set up the characters. I use a database, which in some people's minds apparently is like I show them the Rosetta Stone or something. I guess because I'm more of a science background, and that's where mine goes. And so I'll stat up all the details. I have my entire database, all the fields down to eye color and personality and stuff. But stat up all the characters you think that you'll need for that book before starting it. Give them plenty of personality, give them details, and don't be afraid to let them evolve. Again, in my database, one of the fields I have is current status. So if there's anything changing about them, or also if I want to make a note of, you know, what trouble they're in, it goes in there, and it also helps in record keeping. So you want to get all your characters straightened out first, although that's not to say that someplace along the way in the book it will come up, a character will invent itself. And it'll fit perfectly. Don't be afraid to do that. Just, again, go back to the database and make notes on it so you don't forget what the heck the guy looked like. It also helps, especially in an epic story, plan out your world in all its details. I got maps. I have a world map that's like about this big and four-sided. I got details on the culture, the weather, names and places. You want to plan out every detail of the world you can, even if it's parts that you think will never make it into the story, because guess what? It just might make it into the story. If nothing else as a reference, or maybe you're doing a scene and you're going, yeah, it would be really great if they went to this place, so you better have that place statted up on paper, you know, all the notes done ahead of time. So you got to invent the world before you can write about it. Got my little note paper here. Also, I love grand vistas. Every epic in the plot needs an occasional grand vista to drive home that this is a great alien world. You know, it has a landscape worthy of the plot. I have places, for instance, I have on Maldine, I have the Great Whirlpool. And that's this whirlpool at about, you know, 1,500 miles across, thereabouts. That's been spinning around for as long as anyone knows of as history, and it turns out there's actually a reason for it. Or I have Harbor of the World, which, you know, picture medieval harbor about the size of the Gulf of Mexico. I got woods where the trees are 1,000 feet tall and 100 feet in diameter. But whatever your, you know, vista is, don't be afraid to put in grand vistas, because epics love grand vistas. And be flexible on when it comes to side plots. I've had plenty of times where, yes, I'll have my main, here's the main plot thread, and then some side plots that I hadn't planned for will invent themselves. As long as they don't go astray to where you want the end of the book and that storyline to be, let the side plot line go. It may lead to some very interesting places, add to the plot and the world overall, and again, make it seem real, because not everybody, if they were going on a real-life quest, is going to go from point A to point B in a straight line. They're going to make, you know, stops. I've had, like I said, characters that have invented themselves. I have this one character, Poadar. He's the craziest wizard and a fun character to write, and I needed a character to play off against him to show how nuts this guy is. And it was a one-off character. He tortured some poor person that you'll be seeing in Maldine 2, the Mysteries of Old. And that was going to be that, except I kept coming back to what he was doing to that character, and they became sort of like Joker and Harley Quinn, only not nearly as well adjusted. So if something presents itself, be it a character or a side plot line that makes sense, don't be afraid to explore it. Just remember that outline where you still have to end up at this spot at the end. You may end up at that spot at the end with some extra stuff, you know, that enriches everything. But, you know, so don't be afraid of doing that. Oh yes, part of the effort of getting into writing an epic involves taking care of your real life self. Have a break between the books. Between each of my volumes on Maldine, I always take about 3 weeks off to relax, to catch up on chores, of course, and also you need about a couple weeks to start outlining the next book. So you need to keep the body going good, because it's a support system for the brain. When a chapter is finished, if I have, you know, like an extra day's break before the next chapter or something, fine, I'll take it. Run my errands on bicycle, whatever. But remember, you have to keep yourself alive and healthy, and also give some downtime for that brain to start thinking of new stuff. I walked around in the Arboretum, just letting my thoughts wander, and suddenly, bang, there's a solution for a scene that I was having trouble with. So always remember your brain's doing the work, but the support system of the body you got to watch out for. Which brings me, of course, to the related subject of be healthy, be active. Especially like in my case, writing a 13-book series. It took me 8 years. I took most of the summers off. If I didn't have a break in there and looked after my own health, I wouldn't have been able to finish the darn thing. And that's why I was also able to keep going at it. My typical writing day for a new chapter would be like 8 to 10 hours. And I'd get like 12 to 14,000 words done in that day, and then be editing for about 4 more hours at night. So obviously in that sort of schedule, you need your breaks, you need to keep up your health. Also, the most important, love what you do. No one writes a big, magnificent epic or any other sort of story if they don't love what they're doing in the first place. I don't care if it's not the latest market trend. That's the worst advice I ever heard from a big name regular author in some book is he said, write the market. Except that the market could change by the time you finish your book. And where are you then? Write what you love to do. Write the sort of story you really want to do, because that's when you'll be going at more than 100%. If your soul is into it, then you'll be going. You'll be doing things you didn't think possible. I started out thinking, okay, I'm going to take this whole writing thing seriously and see how far I can go with it. See what my limit is. And every time I found a new limit, I kept pressing beyond that. And before I realized it, I found out that I really didn't have a limit, that I could keep going and keep improving. And all this is because my heart was into it, because this was a story that I've been planning for about 15 years before I started writing it. So make sure that your soul is into it, and you'll be able to get that epic out. And if you're a reader, that's also a secret of the difference versus an epic versus merely a long book. The long book, especially the more tedious ones, the guy obviously didn't have his heart in it. It could be the most well planned out book, but if he didn't have his heart in it, he isn't going by those moments of inspiration or those times in which he's going, I think this would be a great idea. Or if you're a writer, if it's Sunday and the first thought in your head before going to bed isn't, oh good, it's Monday, I get to start on a new chapter. If you aren't experiencing that, then you should try something else, and maybe a different type of story or something else. But that would be the final, most basic piece of advice that I could give. But overall, yes, if you're writing an epic or a really big story or something, this is my terse summary of the sorts of stuff it takes. If you want to see more of my stuff, then you can go to my webpage, www.moldine.com, and have a look at my books. I also have my Inspector Flatfoot stuff up there, which is my sort of tongue-in-cheek way I have fun between all the big stories. You'll see molding there. I don't have my Cyberdawn stuff up. I forgot to mention Cyberdawn. I don't know when you'll be seeing that, but that's another big... that's the 5-book story I mentioned. Anyhow, go to my web page, like, pin, post, share, all the other quick buzzwords, and I'll see you later.